G'day, Ben from Duck Playing Chicken here with the next video in this build series of the Bandai main battle tank from the UC Hardgraph 1/35th scale series. In this episode I hope to get the tank and the figures all built and finished ready for painting. So let's get on to it. Alrighty, so now we've got some lots of little sort of detail greeblies, handles and hooks and stuff that go on. So let's have a look at where they go. Okay, so we've got a number of let's start with the really small ones first. I'm just trying to pick where they actually go. Tweezers. We have these impossibly small little bits out, and they go onto here. And I think I'll probably need to lay some glue down first. It's getting too difficult otherwise. So there are sort of some little indents here. Let's get a little bit more glue in there. And move on to the next one. These are tiny. And of course when you're cutting them out or cleaning them, they zip across the room. There's no way I'm going to be able to show it on camera, but when you're looking at this kit, they've even sort of moulded in the little weld lines on these little hooks here. So the attention to detail, as always with Bandai, is second to none. Now every modeler I think will come across a time where you've kind of got to weigh up how long it takes to find a piece that has disappeared versus scratch building it. So for me, I've lost one of these little eyelet things that go on the end of the barrels here. So I've ended up scratch building one, and it's tiny. It's just a bit of 1mm thick styrene with a 0.6mm hole drilled through it. Now it's time to glue it in place. It's not going to be perfect, I recognise that, but at the end of the day, I don't have a lot of choice. Alright, let's try that, I think. So you can see it's pretty close. It's not spot on, but when it's all painted and weathered, I doubt whether anyone except those of you watching this video will know that it's scratch built or even care. Alright, disaster averted. Let's move on to some of these other greeblies, of which I have actually counted to make sure I've still got all of them. Right, what do we got? We've got two larger eyelets that go on the side here. Now, do they go a particular way? It doesn't look like it. No. We've got two of those. They go on the side here. And again, these things, they have weld marks sort of moulded into them, which is really nice touch. In fact, you'll probably be able to see for these ones. Yeah, so you can sort of see on the edge they've got those weld marks there, which look great. Same thing on the other side. Okay, then we have a couple of grab handles. We've sort of got a few of those. We've got these little ones here, and where do they go? They've got little holes here. Makes life a lot easier. Ah. Oh dear. Come on. Right, I might get a little bit of glue in the holes before I put the handle on. That might be the better way to go. Now that little eyelet I had to scratch build, thankfully it's a lot easier to scratch build than one of these things. Alright, okay, then we've got a whole lot of stuff happening on the top hatch. So these I'm not going to glue in place yet, just because it's going to be easier for me to get the chair out, I think. So what have we got here? We've got this ring goes in here. Ah, that's right. There we go, that's what we want. Okay, so I've got those two pieces in. There is, let's see. This bit. That holds the machine gun. Is that right? Yes, it does. So this little bracket here, spins with the top hatch for the machine gun. Right. Now with the hatch, they actually say in the instructions, they talk about you can have it sort of posed open or closed. So I will have mine open, but just going to let it close for the meantime. So there is some sort of hinge detail in here, but it's not. It doesn't appear to be a working hinge. So it does, maybe kind of works. Kind of works. Oh yeah. Oh, look at that, it does. Okay, so we've got sort of a working hinge, but I suspect it probably, if you're going to set it up in a diorama or something, you want to glue it in place. What else have we got? Okay, we have a little hatch here for protecting the front glass. Where'd that go? So this can be posed open or closed, but look at it, and it goes here. Okay, so it's a little bit tricky to see, but this piece here, that can fold up and cover the glass. Okay, so it looks like we have some aerials here. I'm wondering whether it's worth me actually drilling these out and putting in some actual aerials. Okay, so we can see here in the Pro Modeler advice that they've got an indication to have the aerials in to make them look more realistic. Now, I have looked in my bits drawer and looked at all the different wires I have. I don't have anything that's sort of thin enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an old school trick, which is stretching a sprue. And what you end up with is a really sort of fine bit of plastic like that, which looks pretty convincing as like a whip aerial. So I'll quickly show you how to do that. So you should always sort of hang on to a few bits of your sprue, for you never know when you need it. I mean, you get good sized sort of rods that you can use out of it, and yeah, you shouldn't sort of throw it all away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off a reasonably long bit here, and that's more just so that you don't actually need very much of it, but it's more just so that you can you got two ends to hold on to, and then you can pull it once it's heated up in the middle. Now I'm just going to use a blowtorch here. Ideally you use a candle, but I haven't got one with me at the moment, so this is not probably the ideal way of doing it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it here, and then I'm going to stretch it. So let's turn this guy on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a bit of heat on the sprue. You'll see it go, the plastic will go a bit glossy, and you'll feel it soften, and then I'll take it away from the heat. I'll just pull. Keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling, and then what you've got is I'll just lie it down here. Turn the heat off. And there you've got this beautiful thin piece of plastic that you can then cut, and basically the thickness of it is just determined on how far you stretch it, how far you pull it on each end. So I'll cut that off. Now this one is probably a little bit thick, so I might have to, if I compare it to the other one, you can see how thin I got the other one, and the other one's a bit better, I think, so I might give that another shot. But that's basically the process. You get the sprue over the heat, you'll see it go glossy, it starts to melt. Take it away from the heat and pull it, and yeah, depending on how far you pull it will give you the thickness of the aerial that you need. And of course you can use it for a whole lot of other things, not just aerials and stuff, but yeah, it's a very old modeller's trick, but people have been doing that for years and years. So I've taken the stretch sprue and stuck it to the base of the antennas, and there's two of those. So they're both incredibly thin and delicate, but I think they look a bit more realistic than just using a thicker bit of wire. Now I'm going to keep them off the model for the time being, just because they are delicate and I need to glue them in place. So I think I'll paint them separately and then glue them close to finish. So we've still got some other handles to put on. So these are on the side here somewhere. Actually, I might get glue on here. Okay, so while those steps are drying, I want to talk about some more photo etch, and I'll just highlight it. So these are the smoke, I assume the smoke launchers. There is a tiny bit of photo etch chain that sort of goes on, attaches to the side and then on the top. And what's quite funny, it's not something you actually see in Bandai instructions that often, but it's basically saying that because it's really complex, it's quite tricky to do, it's recommended for advanced modelers. So I think that's kind of interesting. They do say if you're using the photo etch to cut off the tops of the smoke launchers. So I'm going to show you a set that I've done, and it is, I mean, it is really kind of tricky to see, but it does add sort of an extra level of detail in there. So let me get closer, you can sort of, you know, you can sort of see, you know, at least the hint of the chain there. It is a bit messy, like it is really quite fiddly, but after doing a heap of them, I think I've sort of worked out at least a way of doing it. So for this one here, I've sort of done the first 3, and I'm going to do this end one just because it's going to be a bit easier to sort of show on camera. Now I'm just going to show you how small these things are, the actual photo etch, so you sort of get an idea of how fiddly this is going to be. Thankfully they give you a couple of spares, so I can't even realise that it's this little strip here, tiny thin little strip of chain, and thankfully they give you 10 of them. I've already cut out 8, and I cut out 1, and I was trying to put it in place, glue it in place, and the thing took off across the room, so there's no way I was going to find it. So thankfully they've got some spares. Now what you'll need for this is some super glue and some super glue accelerator. I'm definitely going to need that. Okay, so I'm just using some Bob Smith. This is the medium super glue. Find this stuff really good. Put a little bit on my palette here, and then I've got to try and pick up this tiny bit of photo etch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dunk the tab in glue. And position it as best as I can. You can see it's not centered, but it's not so much of an issue. It is hardly going to be seen. But once that's in place, you need to bend the chain up. And over. So I'm just bending it over. You can sort of see there, it's almost touching the top. And for this part of it, this is probably the fiddliest bit, but what I try and do is get just a little bit of accelerator on the end of the chain, and then I'll get the super glue, dab of super glue on the top, and then because there's a little bit of accelerator on the top of that photo etch, I'll actually get it to sort of stick in place. Now again, it's not particularly centered, but once I do that, I get another dab of glue on the top. This is really just to make sure it doesn't go anywhere, and then again, just a drop of the accelerator. And that's made a bit of a horrible mess. So things now covered in accelerator, but it took me quite a few goes to work out that that was the best way around it. So if you're going to do this, hopefully you find that method helpful. And now we've got the chain sort of sitting there, but it doesn't look particularly natural. So I'm just going to bend it down, try and make it look as though it's got a bit of gravity, because they will be sort of hanging on the side. And that's it. That's basically the process I use for the photo etch of those parts. And yes, there's still more photo etch to come. This kit actually has a little bit of it. And of course, the further on you move through the kit, the more complicated the photo etch gets. Okay, so bring this fella over again. And so the smoke launchers go on the sides here. I've just got to be careful that I'm not sort of knocking off anything. And of course the smoke launchers will be painted the same colour as everything else. Okay, make sure the pins locate right in there. Should make sure I've got them around the right way. Yes, I have. It's not going to go anywhere. Those pegs feel as though they're in there reasonably tight. And the same thing on the other side. Okay. Now, as far as the turret goes, that's pretty much it. So now we can look at putting it on the main body. Let's have a look at that. Get the main hull back. Okay, so we've got the main hull here, and I've got sort of all the rest of bits and pieces which I've had, been given plenty of time to dry. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is put the side skirts on. I just need to make sure I've got them around the right way. So they hook into these little hinge bits here. And I'm not going to glue them just because I'm never going to be able to paint the wheels and all that sort of stuff otherwise. So they kind of pressure fit, but they're not really that, so you can sort of see that they're not really that, that tight in there. So let's see this one. That in place like so, and we can put these guys on. Okay, so you can see what the side looks like, and of course these back doors keep falling off. I'm going to have to glue them in place, I think. Alright, then we put the tow hooks in place, or the tow ropes. Alright, and they sort of feed around the back here. Yeah, I think once I've painted that, they're definitely going to need to be glued in. Alright, and this one, and plug that around the back. Okay, are we missing anything else? I don't think so. I think that's kind of the art to putting the turret on. Alright. So of course there's these two slots here which line up with two tabs. Should be able to look at that. Oh, that is a big tank. Even at 1/35th scale, that is still massive. Now, to give you an idea of the size of this, this is, admittedly it's a light tank, it's a T70. But that's in 1/35th scale. Look at that, you can fit about 6 of these things inside this one. That is huge. So yeah, I think it is a big tank, even at 1/35th scale. Okay, so looking at the M60 heavy machine gun, we've got a number of plastic parts that all go together, but there's one. So there's two photo etch bits. This little one on the end, that is tiny. To give you an idea of what we're sort of dealing with here, let's see, so it's like one of those little ones, And then we've got the sight, which is one of those. Now thankfully they give you a couple of spare, well no, they give you a spare of each. I suspect I'm going to need it, given that I'll probably lose one. So first thing first is to cut these out. Again, just use a tile hard surface to cut these out. And voice, that is tiny. Right, now what's next? There might be just a little bit of still a little bit of the nub on into this one, so I think I'm going to have to hold it with some more bending pliers and just nip off the or sand off the end. So I think these tiny little bits are ready to go, but what I'm going to do is put them in a dish because I will lose sight of them otherwise. Alright, so we've got those prepared. Let's see, first we've got the main barrel here. We've got this piece at the top. Okay, that's good. It just pressure fits in there. I'll get a little bit of glue in there. Don't think it's going to need much, given that it's feels like it's pretty tight in there. Got this little piece. How does that slide on? No, it just sticks to the end, I think. Yeah. Now I apologise, you're not going to see a lot of this, just because these pieces are tiny. So just put a little bit of glue in there, and then I want to make sure I've got this around the right way. Okay, goes that way. So that attaches on the end like that. And then we have this pit. Trying to work out, line it up right. And there is the tiniest little nub that attaches to it here. A little bit of glue in there. And a bit of glue on the bottom. Okay, so that's the base. So that'll be attached to the stand. And what I might do is just let that sit for a little bit and dry before I attempt to put the photo etch on. So I'll leave that over there, and let's move on to the M299. So you get the two machine guns, so one for the front of the turret and one for the rear, and this one's got a lot of tiny pieces, and I am sure one of them I am going to manage to ping across the room, which I really don't want to do. Let's see, here it goes. Like that. Yep, and of course it falls off. Yeah, so I don't know a lot about guns, so I don't know what these pieces are called. I just know they're incredibly fiddly at this size. Well, I gave a good look, but I have lost B19. It's gone. So, looks like we're going to be doing a bit more scratch building. The problem is the floor where I work, it is grey. So, trying to find anything that's a similar colour is near on impossible. Let's see if we can... So what I'm doing here is I'm using a bit of 0.5mm thick styrene, and I think, thankfully, I think I'll get away with scratch building this bit. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. Yeah, sure, it's not going to be super accurate anymore. I think I need something a bit wider, because essentially it is just sort of a straight bit with a couple of notches taken out of it. And again, once once these things are painted up, you do get away with a bit more. Let's see how this looks. Oi. Okay. Alrighty, let's see if we drop this on. Here's a look. Yeah, I think it needs to be a bit longer. Yeah, I know there's... I'll just use a little bit of a scrap there, I think. Let's try and get this tacked in place. Get this little bit of scrap at the end and drop that in there. Now, any of you who've been watching my channel for a while, you know that not everything I do goes perfectly. I have plenty of problems along the way, but I think this is a good example of showing you just another thing I really love about the hobby, which is problem solving. And of course, if you lose a piece, or a piece doesn't work out, doesn't fit properly, or something like that, you have to sort of work out the best way to deal with it. So I reckon once that's painted up, that should be fine. Alright, let's see if we can get through this without losing any more pieces. We've got the sight, and the sight, which way does that go? Okay, so that gives you an idea of what it's looking like at this stage. Is it far from perfect, but in most cases I think it should be, people won't even notice. Alright, then we've got the magazine. which is in up here somehow. Okay, so we've got the magazine in place. Last thing is the little stand. Now they give you an option of whether the stand is deployed or folded up. Now I'm going to have this mounted on the back of the tank, so I'll have the stand folded up. Now, is this going to press fit long enough for me to get some glue in there? Oh, no way. Is that what I think it is? Where is that? It has just broken. Yeah. Yeah. Not much luck with the gun today. It's alright. The main thing is I didn't lose the piece, it's just broken off. Alrighty, so what I'm going to do is this other leg that has fallen off the stand, I'm actually going to let this dry and then I'll glue that that back on, but that's incredibly fine. So I might do that one off camera. Left to the side. Alright, now I think we have some final bits to do for the mounting of the guns. Yeah, okay. I think I'm gonna have to glue this gun to this stand. I don't think it's gonna doesn't look like it, yeah, press fits at all, so this has to be glued in place. And the other gun goes on the peg here. Okay, so we have also some other bits that go onto the that hold up the barrels. So they give you two options. They give you the barrel stands sort of folded down, or they give you the option where they're folded up. So let's have a look at how they look when they're. So you can see the stands sort of in place there. It's a nice little touch. I think when although I think for mine, I'm going to have the stands down, because given that you've sort of got the figures with it as well, I want to just make it look as though it is actually on the prowl. So I'll have those in that position there. Now I've done enough of these kits to know that when you're assembling the figures, it's always a good idea to make sure you have the vehicle or whatever they're sitting on or interacting with, make sure that's built first. Because these figures, I mean, they're really well crafted and well designed, but there is a little bit of play in like the position of the arms and the head and all that sort of thing. So you kind of want to, make sure, like for example the commander here, we know he's going to sit within the turret, so his hand needs to be resting on the turret as he's standing on the seat. So we've got the tank built up, and of course now it's time for putting the figures together. The other one will be this guy here as well, because he's sort of leaning on the, in the corner of the basket there, so it's important that his arms or his hands are actually resting on that basket there. The other thing to keep in mind with the figures is there's some serious small photo etch to go with them. So these ones on the left here, they're actually dog tags, and so we've got sort of dog tags on like on a string, and then you've got just individual dog tags, and then we have the microphone which goes on to the commander a little microphone that attaches to his headset, which I'm going to question my sanity in putting that on, but we'll see how it goes. So they talk about the photo etch E, which is his little microphone there, and they talk about the dog tag options that you have sort of down here. Now for the driver, just look at this, it looks like you don't install A9 or B4. So, but okay, so for this guy you only make half of him if you want him to actually sit in the tank. So basically he gets his legs taken off and one of his little satchels there. So yeah, it's important that you sort of, like I said, you get an idea of what the vehicle is, that they're going to be interacting with, or the objects, and that sort of helps determine how these kits are going to go together. Okay, so starting with the commander, the first thing I'm going to do is glue his arms on. Actually, no, first thing I'm going to do is put his head on. So, and the reason I'm doing that is because that'll dictate where his headset is, and then that will inform where his arm needs to attach. Okay, so I'll just get a bit more glue in there. So there's no sort of pegs or anything like that sort of indicate exactly where the limbs and what have you go. So you really just need to sort of get everything kind of glued in place. And then of course if you're using, to me, extra thin, you do have a little bit of work time with it. So next is his cap. I need a bit of thicker glue. Okay, so for his cap I'm just going to use a bit of thicker glue. So this is Revell Contactor. See what happens when we put the microscopic little ear pieces on. So there is a left and right for the sides of the headset, because the one on his left has the microphone attached to it. Trying to get the earpiece sort of lined up properly with the cap. It looks like there's sort of a little bit of an indent there. So as the glue sort of sets, I can I've got a little bit of working time. So I want to make sure these ear pieces match up with the band that goes across the top of his cap. Doesn't match up perfectly, but it's actually not bad considering they're all sort of individual pieces. We can attempt to get his hand, so his hand sort of grasping the earpiece. Looks as though that will match pretty well. So get a bit of thick glue on his arm here. And so you can see, because I've sort of, done it in this order, it actually makes it really easy for the placement of the arm. That there's definitely, it looks as though he's actually grasping the earpiece rather than just having it float in sort of mid-air. So one thing I do really appreciate about these UC Hardgraph kits is that the poses they have for the figures are really quite natural. You know, they actually sort of look believable. They're not sort of, you know, just static figures that looks like they're in the middle of you know, performing a task or what have you. Alright, now I'm going to stick on some of these other pieces before I sort of set him up in the tank. So what do we have first? So we've got a couple of pouches, and there's also his gun. And I might just use a little bit of thick glue. Just a dab. Hold in place there. He's got another sort of satchel thing that goes underneath, but I'll wait till I've done his other arm first. So again, let's put this one here. So we've got that sort of position there. We've got his radio on his chest. Make sure that goes around the right way. So just a little dab glue. And now I guess if you're feeling really courageous, you could actually put in the wire that joins up his radio and his headset. But I ain't that brave. Ain't that brave. Alright, now the last two pieces, here's arm and the little satchel under here. I want to get his arm positioned right first, but before I do that I want to allow all this to dry, so I'm going to sort of set him aside for a bit and let him dry. Okay, so the next one is the driver, and like I mentioned before, if you want him sort of sitting in the tank, they say not to install his legs or his little pouch on the side. So what I'm going to do here is, I think I might still sort of assemble the, at least put the pouch on the side of his pants here. Tossing up whether to actually sort of even just magnetize it. You know, if I wanted to pose him sort of outside, I could just have him, you know, have the top half of him and put a magnet in. Maybe I'll do that. Might be a it's not a fantastic sort of fit, but we might be able to do something about that. Alright. Anyway, first of all, let's get his head sort of attached to his torso. Now this one's not as important where the location of the limbs are and all that sort of thing. It's going to be a little bit easier to sort of put together. He's got a very stern face, this fella. He's not happy. Now, while I'm putting this together, I want to tell you about a mistake I made years ago when I put one of these kits together. I thought it'd be a great idea to paint all the limbs and everything separately and then glue it. Nah. Nah. You're better off putting together the whole figure. Or otherwise it's just going to be too much of a pain. So you get to a point with you know, attaching bits to these figures where you sort of, you know, you need it to dry a bit before you put on the next part. So I'm actually going to let this set before I worry about the rest of his components. Okay, so I've got the commander sort of sitting in the turret or standing on his chair. So now it's a matter of sort of getting his arm, his left arm, sitting correctly on the edge of the turret. So I'm going to use a bit of the thick glue, so it takes a little bit longer to set. And then I'm going to place his arm on and and get him set up in place. Okay, so let's see how he stands. So what I'm doing is I'm rotating his arm just slightly because I reckon that'll give him a better. There we go. So now his hand's sort of resting on the turret. So I'm happy with that position. I'll just check to make sure there's nothing strange going on with his arm. And the last little bit is he has a little satchel that sort of goes under his arm there. And just take a bit of a guess where it's going to go. Okay, just a final check to make sure he still fits in there okay. Yep, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Okay, so I can put him aside to dry. Now I'm going to take the turret off to set up the driver, but just before I do, I just want to show I have glued in. Let's take this off. So I've glued in the rear machine gun mount. So that was just one little piece there that sits on the back of the basket. And so I'll take that off. Now we can have a look at the driver. Okay, so last time I did sort of one arm but not the other. I just want to see how he sort of sits in there, because I think when I put his next arm on, I'm not sure what's going to happen. Because you don't sort of glue his legs in place, it'll be interesting to see how he sort of sits. There is a, I don't know if you can see that, there is a bar there that I suspect the pilot's supposed to sit on. And of course he falls in. So I actually suspect you're supposed to glue it in place. I reckon I could probably magnetise it some way. No, he definitely he definitely doesn't want to sit there on his own. Alright, so I think what I'll do, it won't actually matter where his arms are. So I can glue his arm on and all the other bits and pieces except for his legs. Alright, so I assume he's got his other hand on sort of one of the control sticks or something. Okay, so move that there. And then he does have one of these satchels on the side of his legs. Once I get this all properly glued up, I can then sort of look at whether I go down the option of magnetising it. So I'm just double checking that that satchel that I just stuck on is not going to interfere with his other arm or anything, but no, that's all fine. So what do we got? Then one on the other side too. Okay. And again, I'll just check that that's not going to interfere with his arms. No. That should work pretty well. And then finally, his sidearm. Sidearm there. So I think he's all ready to go. I'll let him dry so that then I can work out how I'm going to work with some magnets there. Now the last guy, he sits on the corner of the basket, so I need the turret. As I was getting the details for the other guy, I just realised I've missed the radio on the driver. So let's get that put on him. Alright, now for this guy. So it looks like we need to set up his legs. Get some glue in here. Now there are going to be some seams to deal with because of these two leg parts. What I want to do is I just want to check how he's actually going to stand. Is he going to oh yeah, it's not too bad actually. He's sort of sitting in the corner there. Alright, let's see if we can get his torso in as well. Yeah, that's going to fit, no worries, so that's good. What I'm doing is I'm using the seam along his back there just as a reference to keep his body properly aligned to his legs. And I'm hoping that's enough. I'll be able to set up his arms properly. Alright, so let's get his head into place. Yeah, I think I have to let this dry a bit before I go any further. It's starting to get a bit difficult to press everything in place without messing everything else up. Okay, I've allowed time for this guy to dry, so his torso and his legs and head are now attached. Now there's a couple of extra pieces we have to stick on. First of all, he has a sleeve. It's actually a separate bit, so I'll glue that in. Again, I'm just going to use the thicker glue. Now at the moment he looks as though he's got a hunchback, but that's just the pose because he's leaning forward on his left arm, so that's what looks a bit odd. But once I get that arm sort of, or that sleeve stuck in there, it'll give me a better chance to line up the arms properly on the corner of the rail. So next thing I'll do is put on his hat. So I might as well have his hat drying at the same time as his sleeve. Yeah, so got his head in place, got his sleeve all happening, so I'll put him aside to dry. Right, now we have this guy. The next step is to magnetize him, so I want to get a magnet in the base of his torso and in the base of his legs, and then yeah, the seam's not really flash, but given that most of the time I suspect this guy's going to be in the tank, it's not going to be so much of an issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a dressmaker's pin. So these are 0.6mm diameter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole in his torso. So I'm just going to drill a center point just with my knife first. It's far from center, but it's I think it'll be near enough. And so the first step is, what I'm doing is I'm actually drilling a hole that I'm going to snip the dressmaker's pin, so it's just the sharp point, and put that in the hole that I'm just drilling now, and then I join up the two pieces, and what happens is the pin will hopefully leave an imprint of where I need to drill the other hole. So I've drilled the hole. The next step is to insert the pin, okay, point first, And what I'm doing here is just getting an indication of where I need to cut it, because all I need is just the smallest point protruding. That's all I need. It's just going to mark where I need to drill the other hole. Alright, so you can see just a little bit of it sort of poking out, so I'm going to pull it out with some pliers and try and lodge it the other way. Okay, so you can see that little pin sticking out there. So I'm hoping now when I line up this, push down hard. I think that's about as good as I'm going to get it. Okay, and pull it away. A pin stuck in there, but that's a good sign because that means that we have the where the matching hole needs to go. So now that I've got an indication of where the two holes need to be, next step is to choose my magnets. So these are 3mm round, 3mm diameter by 2mm deep, and I reckon these should be strong enough. If they're not, I can actually put a couple in there. So I need a 3mm drill bit, drill those out. So I've drilled out the matching holes, and I ended up having to go to 4mm, just checking the magnets to make sure they fit. So now it's a matter of sort of just getting them in there, and just making sure that it goes deep enough. Yeah, I think I don't reckon I'll need any glue with that. That's a pretty tight fit. But I just want to make sure that the magnet doesn't sort of stand proud of that dip there. So, yep, that ain't. It is coming out actually. So I might need to put some glue in there, I think. Alrighty, just a dab of CA. Actually, I could probably just make sure we get the magnet around the right polarity. And just dunk it in like that, I think. There we go. Just a little bit on top for good measure. And some accelerator. Now if this doesn't work, it's not so much a drama because really only need half of him to be sitting in the driver's seat. But it'd be nice if we had the choice. Alright, so now we put that in, and so if you ever want to work, you know, if you're working with these small sort of magnets, and one of the mistakes that are easily made is getting your polarity around the wrong way, but where you got something like this where you're trying to sort of work out how deep you need to go and all that sort of thing, it helps if you've got the first one in and then you use that as a reference. So then I can push that in, and there we've got a magnet. And we know that it's the right polarity, so that when we do this, look at that. Oh my god, that actually worked. I was I was not expecting it to work that well, but it did. So now we've got a man with detachable legs, or detachable torso, however you want to see it. Yeah, that actually works pretty well. Alright, so the next step is to get the hull of the tank. Alright, what I've got here is the hull. I've taken off all the, pretty much most of the detail stuff that's sort of loose fit on here. just because I'm going to be flipping it up and over, so I don't want everything sort of falling out all the time. Now what I want to do is I want to put a magnet in this little bit here, so that when I drop the pilot in, he actually sits in there pretty well, but if you move him around a bit he will fall out, and so I really don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to try and do is try and work out where the magnet has to go. And I think if I put a marking on this so I know which way it goes. So which way are we? That's the front. Which means that's the front. Just so I get him facing the right way. Right, so if we sit him, so we get this, alright, that's kind of how he sits in there. So yeah, he actually sits in there pretty well. So what I need to do is basically put a magnet in there, and I think what I'll end up doing is putting a larger magnet in. This is a 5mm by 5mm magnet, so I'm hoping if I get the polarity around the right way, I can sort of move him around a little bit until I get him in the right position. And then we can just double check to make sure he'll poke up through the hole, right? I'll just obviously put this in. Alright, that's actually pretty good. Pretty happy with that. So what I'll do is get some super glue in this. Alright, a little bit of accelerator. I might clean that up a little bit, I think. Alright, so let's take him off, clean this up a bit better, and then stick it all down and see how well he just sort of drops in place. But I think that's going to be a little bit better than just having him sort of sit there, or even have him glued in, because the other guys I'm not going to glue in, they're just going to be sort of sitting in situ, because I might want to button up the tank and make it look like it's in battle. Eventually I might get around to doing some sort of diorama with it. Let's put that back in and see what happens now. Oh, it just snaps into place. Like that, like I bought one. And the actual spacing around his body is pretty good too, so it looks quite sort of natural. He's sort of looking off to the side a little bit, which is what he's doing in the instructions too, so that is good. Okay, so it looks like my experiment with the tank driver actually worked. So he's done, the commander's done. Now I've just got to wait for this to dry a little bit more, and I'll get this guy sorted out, and I think we are going to be pretty much done as far as the assembly goes. Alright, so it's time to stick the arms on this fella, and of course he'll be standing on the edge of the basket like that. Just try and hold that up so you kind of get an idea. He's sort of crouched down a little bit and holding on while the tank's speeding along. So I think the best bet is to glue these arms on and wait for the glue to get a bit tacky, and then I can maneuver the arms around a little bit, because it is going to be important that the hands connect to the railing properly, or otherwise it's going to look like he's sort of just floating there, which is not going to look really great. It might help if I get the right arm around, just whoops, Alright, so that's his left arm. Let's get a bit more glue on his right arm after we've screwed that up. Alright. He does have his arm twisted almost in a sort of contortion pose. So you can sort of see here his arm, his right arm is sort of really quite a fair way off sideways. Alright, let's see how that goes. Alright, I think that's about as good as I'm going to get it. So I don't think it's going to be as perfect as I want it to be, but I don't think I'm going to have a lot of choice. Like I said earlier, the way Bandai have designed these figures, at least you do have that little bit of flexibility to sort of maneuver the limbs around a little bit, so that you can get it to at least get it close. You know, it's not like the whole thing is just molded as one piece, so you've got no flexibility at all. Just also a bit of an update on the guns, because I realise I haven't actually sort of covered them properly. This machine gun here, you can see I've put the photo etch sight in the end there, and also attached the magazine, which wasn't on it before. And there is a tiny little bit of photo etch right on the end, which was just a nightmare to get on, and it's not quite on straight, but I think once this is painted black, give it a bit of a dry brush, I don't think anyone's going to notice. The other one was where I broke the stand, so I've managed to glue that leg back on. It's still incredibly fragile though, so I don't think it'll take much to knock it off again. But of course there's the scratch built bit on the back, which doesn't look flash, but it'll be fine once it's got some paint on it. So the next step for me is to get all this stuff primed, and I will be priming absolutely everything black, including the figures, so that'll just give me a good sort of starting point. Because there's not a lot of sort of seams to clean up on this kit, I'm not too worried about, you know, normally I paint it grey or something like that, but no, I'm going to go with black. Get everything primed, and then it's ready for the proper painting stage. So until the next video, I'll catch you later.